everybody. What a treat to have you all with us. Thank you for being here, and our friends that we've met in the last couple of days. So special. Thank you. All right, Mr. Clayton. This is Ezra right here.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all.
Clayton. I'm Mama.
What's up, everyone? So we'll keep moving. So you heard a little bit about what our organization does. Basically sports, right, for people with physical disabilities. And I'm going to share a little bit about what makes us unique. We'll talk a little bit about the athletes we serve and our why. But I want to tease you that this story is about much more than a nonprofit. It's actually our love story. So you'll get a little bit of that. And it's our story of our family.
Ew. We don't need to hear that.
So just a couple things that make us unique in providing these sports opportunities for people with physical disabilities. We've been working on it since 2013, so almost 10 years. Not an easy journey because a lot of people in the United States especially, and maybe around the world, don't even really know what the Paralympics are. And they don't even really know what adaptive sports are. So we're trying to change that as well, right? Trying to grow the awareness. But a couple things that we do uniquely, we scale, right? We're already offering about 100 unique opportunities for people to learn sports. We will do about 20 sports a year, so that's a lot of sports. And so what I love about that is that it creates a place for athletes to start their journey, right? Because they can learn about a lot of different sports. We offer them free equipment, so especially if you use a chair for sports, you need a chair for track and a chair for tennis, a chair for basketball. So we loan equipment to the athletes. We have about 140 pieces of equipment that's expensive for us to buy. We do a lot of competition, so we love competition. When do you feel like an athlete? When you line up against somebody and you really have to go. We do community outreach, so we're out trying to find new athletes and spread the word and spread our love for sport, right? We also allow able-bodied people to participate with our athletes. So if you come to our events, you can compete against this guy right next to him. And that's especially powerful for families, right? Sometimes siblings, if one sibling is in a chair and one sibling is not, they don't have that many opportunities to play on an equal and level playing field. And then, the last thing I would say is Los Angeles, which is where a lot of our programming is, right, is the home and the host of the 2028 Paralympic Games. And so we're sitting in Los Angeles in a really kind of a cool place where the world's going to be watching us, right? The world's going to be looking at Los Angeles. And we keep trying new things, trying to innovate ahead of LA 28. And we hope over time we can train all the volunteers that are going to be at the Paralympic Games, right, supporting the athletes, and educate the spectators and create fans of the Paralympic Games, because it's really pretty awesome. All of the Paralympic sports are really fascinating, and so we hope that the general public in the United States will really start to love the Paralympics as much as we do. How are we doing on that video? Yeah, I think that's it. So this just gives you a little visual of what we do.
Never mind.
Yeah. I'll go. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can go do it. You jump in.
So,
Yep.
who do we serve? Who are we serving? 15% of the population has some kind of physical disability. So we're not talking cognitive, right? That's only 2% of the population. We're talking 15% with a physical disability, right? That's 1 billion people in this planet have some kind of physical disability. Now, 10%, I feel really weird. I'm going to stand up. 10% are like Ezra. Ezra was born missing limbs. It's called congenital. He was born with his physical differences. But that's only 10% of that 1 billion. The rest acquire the physical disability. So how? Cancer from illness. There is accidents, car accidents, disease. These are things that actually the majority of the population, that's how they acquire a physical disability. And so that is the population we serve. And that's what we witnessed was there wasn't opportunities for people like Ezra and the rest of the population, which is 15 million people in the United States, to play sports. And we all know the power of sports, right? That's why we're here. We know the power of sports in transforming people's lives. And so I want to give you a couple of examples of what we experienced. We have one boy, little Willie. He was playing basketball, 5 years old, playing basketball in his front yard. Drive-by shooting. Have you guys heard of drive-by shootings? Something that happens, unfortunately, a lot in the United States. Drive-by shooting, and the bullet hit this 5-year-old boy, and he became paralyzed in a wheelchair. Another one of our boys, his name is Alpha. He was bike riding with his older brother, and they were crossing the street. One car stopped, another car stopped. They were slowly going across the street, and the third car plowed through Alpha and actually hit him twice and pinned him to the ground. He was emergency evacuated, taken to a hospital. He almost lost his life twice. They saved his life, but he became paralyzed. So let me explain to you what Angel City did. So when there is an accident like that, when it comes to children, adults, whatever it is, we get calls from doctors, hospitals. We get a call, Clayton got a call that Alpha, this boy, is in the hospital. He almost lost his life. He has survived, and now he's in a wheelchair. And we have this big event in June in Los Angeles that we will tell you about. A huge festival similar to this where people get to try and play sports. And we told the family, we begged the father, we said, please bring Alpha to our games. And they couldn't afford to come down, so we called our sponsors, we got money, we raised money, we brought him down to our event. So our event starts on a Thursday, goes through Sunday. Clinics, activities, carnival, people playing sports, and then competition during the weekend. So Alpha comes in, and you guys can imagine, the boy just came out of the hospital, beaten down by life. The most traumatic, gut-wrenching, painful thing to witness was seeing Alpha come in a wheelchair with his parents. And they walk in, and we're like, hi, Alpha. Nothing, not a word. His head was down. You could see bruises and scars on his arm. His older brother, the one that witnessed his little brother get hit by a car, didn't even say a word. So we took Alpha. We put him in a racing chair. That's what we do we have equipment. We put him in a racing chair. He just came in there against Willie. Remember the story I told you about Willie, the 5-year-old that was drive-by shooting? They were in a race together, but other people too. And ready, set, go. They go, and Alpha comes in last, understandably. And he comes in last, and he starts sobbing. And we're like, oh my God. We're thinking, oh my gosh, this was a bad idea. It was too soon. This poor kid, this wasn't the right thing. And we run to the parents, and the parents are like, thank you. No, this is so good. This is the first time the child has even cried since his accident. First time he showed any emotion. So we took him over to the swimming pool where we had clinics and people swimming, and we had a gold medalist, Paralympian. She was in the water. She lifts Alpha off his wheelchair, brings him into the swimming pool, and Alpha starts swimming. And he went from event to event to event. And by Sunday, when our event was over, our festival was over, you couldn't get Alpha out of the stadium. He was cracking wheelchair jokes. He was doing wheelies on his wheelchair. He was laughing. He was smiling. He was transformed. And that is the power of sport. That is why we do what we do. The parents, the families, the kids, the adults, the veterans that come from war that would otherwise in the past, had passed from war, they survive, but they come back maybe without an arm, without a leg. So this is why we do what we do, and this is who we serve.
All right. How amazing is she, right? We're going to show the video now real quick so you can see what we do.
Angel City Sports, in simple terms, is a high-growth, high-impact, nonprofit program designed to help kids, adults, and veterans with physical disabilities live healthy, active, and optimized lives. We provide free, year-round sports training, equipment, and competitive opportunities, where really what Angel City does is about much more than sport. It is about creating a sense of belonging for our athletes and a more inclusive society through education and awareness building. Our truest passion is to find children and adults who didn't know or believe sports were possible for them and expose them to the amazing world of adaptive sports. Angel City Sports is creating a community and a sense of belonging. We help build self-acceptance, self-confidence, and ultimately enable our athletes to flourish on and off the court. We want to find, inspire, and develop adaptive athletes so no one is left on the sidelines because the water doesn't know a swimmer is blind. The track doesn't know a runner sprints on a blade. The tennis racket doesn't know if an athlete plays in a sports chair. An athlete is an athlete. It's that simple. We know what we do works. And just as important, it has the potential to impact everyone involved, including family, friends, and the broader community. Join Angel City Sports. Join the movement. Help us transform the lives of our athletes, kids, adults, and veterans, so they can achieve their dreams on and off the field of play.
Cool, right? Do you guys want to come to Los Angeles and volunteer and be with us? Yes? Come to Los Angeles and volunteer? That one, he's falling asleep.
Uh-oh.
Do you want to wake up and come with us?
We got to wake him up.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Ezra, but real quick, that jump that you saw where he went crazy, right? Did you see it at the end? Ezra did a high jump. He was younger, 2019. That was the jump where he made the U.S. Paralympic team as a 14-year-old at our home event, at our home track at UCLA. So it was a pretty magical moment. And in the background, there's a little guy jumping, like a little jumping bean. That's his youngest brother, Elijah. You ready to go?
I accidentally knocked the box off right there, so I had to put it back. Hi, everybody. I'm Ezra. I am the son of these two, and thank you guys for being here. I met some of you yesterday and when I spoke, and I want to talk a little bit about, my mom mentioned it and alluded to it, and you heard it in the video as well, but why sports? Why do we do what we do? Why do we provide sports opportunities for people with physical disabilities? And so to understand the reason why we do what we do, I'm going to read you guys a little quote from Nelson Mandela. He said, "Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to the youth in a language they understand. Sport can create hope where once only there was despair. It is more powerful than government in breaking down racial barriers." So we know the power of sport, what it does for you physically, psychologically, what it does for your soul. You've heard it with Alpha, you've heard it with Willie, you've seen it in the videos. But I will share from the perspective of a person with a physical disability why what we do is so important. Now, when you live with a physical disability, and I mentioned it in my speech yesterday, but everywhere you go, you don't feel like you belong. 24/7, you feel like an outsider. You're stared at constantly, people pointing fingers, whispering. You're the center of attention at all times, and not always in a good way. And so to have a place, to have a thing like sports where you can bring people together and provide a community, because really what we do is sports, but what we do is beyond just sports. It's bringing people together. It's bringing people from all different walks of life, people from all different backgrounds, all different experiences, and providing them with a community, a family that a lot of them feel like they don't have. And so you think about the normal benefits that the average person receives through sport, whether that be confidence, whether that be social well-being, whether that be mental health improvement, all of that stuff, now times 10 for people with physical disabilities, because they truly don't feel like they belong, they feel like outsiders, and they come to an event where everyone has a physical disability. The able-bodied people are now the outsiders, right? So they truly feel like they belong, they feel like they have a community, and that's what is so powerful about adaptive sports and about the work that we do, is because we're bringing people together, we're providing a community, we're providing a village of support for people who really don't feel that otherwise. And so it allows these people with physical disabilities who many times didn't even know that sports was possible for them. They're told by doctors, they're told by nurses, they're told by people in their life that sports is not for them. And so realizing their own potential, the benefits of going after a goal, unlocking the things that you didn't think were possible in your life. And so all of that is the reason why organizations like Angel City Sports and other adaptive sports nonprofits are so important in the work that they do. So,
Cool. You got it? You ready?
thank you for clapping, guys. To my mother and father, would you guys like to share your story, how you guys met? I'll cover my ears for part of this. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, would you guys like to share your story and how you met? Give us the rundown. I want to hear it all.
I think we should start. I was a young girl, business professional, and I was in San Francisco on a business trip, and there was a gentleman there that I was meeting, that I was dating, and I was supposed to spend the weekend. I'll keep it PC because there's like
Okay.
PG because there's like young people here, and and he comes over to take me out to dinner in San Francisco, and I don't know what came over me. I literally don't know what came over me. I opened my hotel room and I said, "You need to go." And he's like, "What?" And I said, "You need to go. I don't want to go out with you. I don't want to spend the weekend with you. I don't know what happened."
She was a player back in the day. That's what it was.
And I said, and he's like, "Bahar, I had planned a weekend and this and that." And I said, he said, and I said, you have to go. And I shut the hotel room door, packed up my bags, and tried to get the next flight out of San Francisco to go back home to Los Angeles. And the next flight was early in the morning, like a 7 a.m. flight. And I am rushing in the morning to get to this flight. And as I'm running to the airport and I'm running to the gate, I see this man. And I literally stopped in my tracks and looked at him and said, "Oh my gosh, there he is." And so,
I'm still here.
so then you
So I was in San Francisco that week. It was
to go on a
it was
date.
a Thursday.
So
No,
he was there
I was
to go on
there
a date
for work, and I happened to have a date the night before.
with a police officer.
She was a police officer.
And she still remembers.
The date didn't work out that well for me either. So the next morning, I go to the airport
To get on the next flight to come to Los
to
Angeles.
come back to Los Angeles, where I lived. And I remember the moment where I saw Bahar like it was yesterday. Because you think about the airport, right? The terminal, it's like this long hallway, right? And I saw her walking from pretty far away. I was on the phone with the cop from the night before, still trying to figure that one out. But I saw Bahar walking down the terminal towards my gate, and then she ended up at my gate, and then she ended up on my plane. And so, I mean, it was sort of love at first sight, but it got better a couple hours later.
Well, So anyway, so we ended up, he was in the front of the plane. I was all the way in the back. And the whole time, this was us. This was us. This is me, like, looking over and checking him out. And he kept turning around and looking over at me. And my heart's racing out of my body. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, almost like I was having an out-of-body experience. Like, it wasn't me. I was like a puppet in this show, and I had no control. But I just kept looking over, and he kept looking back at me. But there was turbulence the whole flight. And we had to fasten the seatbelt. And so the whole flight, we really didn't get to talk. And
Well,
so
I did kind of, I made an effort.
I'm
So
skipping a little. He did try to make an effort.
instead of throwing my soda can out 2 feet in front of me, I walked to the end of the plane to do that.
So he did at one point come down the aisle, and he starts coming, and I got so nervous. And I was with a friend of mine, and I was just like, talk to me. And I'm just pretending like I'm having the best time. Girlfriends, you will like, I was like laughing. and he walks by.
But as
and
I get closer, I don't have the courage to really say anything. Like I chickened out. I just said hi, and I kept walking.
He said hi, and I said hi, and then he kept walking. And so that was the majority of it. So we land in Los Angeles, and he's in the front of the plane, so he's the first person off the plane. And I don't mean this in an arrogant way at all, but I just knew there was just this crazy connection. And so I knew I got off the plane, and he was standing there waiting for me. And as you know, the last person on the plane takes 100 years to get off the plane. So he waited a very long time for me, and we both just looked at each other, and we just started laughing. And we just knew that there was this crazy connection, and we didn't understand what it was and what was happening. And fast forward, maybe our third or fourth date, we were together, and I said to him, I just want you to know, I want my life to be extraordinary. Like, I want my life to be extraordinary. And he said, I want you to know, I want my life to be extraordinary. And we made it, and it was something very embedded in our souls, that we want to live a life of service and making an impact. And that is what brought us together, this idea of serving and making a difference. And back then, I was an environmental studies woman. I had studied it in college, studied air pollution, rainforest destruction, anything that had to do with the environment. That was my world. And Clayton was, at that time, he had already worked at the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, working on ozone depletion. So we thought we were coming together to be the voice for the environmental movement. And back then, I had started my acting career. I was an actress. Everything changed when Ezra was born. But at the height of my career, I was doing big movies. You guys know Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise. Do you know that movie? I was in that film with Tom Cruise. I was at the Academy Awards for a film called Crash. It won Best Film. Any of you guys? I think the type. Yeah. So do you remember the film Crash? Remember the store owner daughter who buys the gun for her father? That's me. So my career completely changed. Right. I was a big time actress. And my career was doing really well, but I was preggo with my firstborn child. And actually, at the premiere of Crash, which I was saying, Crash, any of you know the movie? I know you ladies know the movie. Does anybody else, you guys, my Thai friends, you know the movie Crash? It won Best Film? Doesn't matter. You guys probably know Mission Impossible or something like that. All right, anyway, they don't know. Okay, doesn't matter. So at the height of my career, I was pregnant, and I was on the red carpet of Crash having contractions, and I was pregnant with this guy right here. I was pregnant with Ezra, and at the premiere, I was having contractions, and I gave birth like a day and a half later to Ezra. So when Ezra was born, we had no idea that he was going to be born missing limbs. When Ezra was born, he was missing the entire left side. Something happened to the left side of his body, and we had no idea. And then the man who created the 3D ultrasound, the ultrasound that you get to see, the man who created it is the man who did our ultrasound. He didn't even see, because Ezra was hiding in the womb his left side. And so when Ezra was born, we were in shock, right? We were in shock. We didn't know children that were missing fingers, missing like parts of their foot. Ezra's entire leg was twisted in, and it was a really scary not knowing what will be the life for this child. I was in utter shock, and I think this is for young boys here. This is probably like, they don't get, this is too much for you guys, but I couldn't imagine what life would be for my child that was missing limbs and what the world would look like for him. So fast forward a month, not even a month, a couple of weeks later, I am at home with my new baby, and at the hospital they said, you're going to have to amputate his leg. And Ezra didn't have fingers, and the doctor, he wasn't even 24 hours old, 24 hours. And they said, you're going to have to amputate his leg, which means to remove his leg. And since he doesn't have fingers, when they remove his leg, they can do a toe-to-hand transplant. That, which looks like a thumb, is actually Ezra's toe. That when they amputated his leg, 15 hours, when they amputated his leg, they took the big toe and made another finger for him. Very difficult and complicated procedure. But that was when he was 3. I'm telling you, he just was born. And I can't even imagine what life is going to be like. So he is at home, and I put him to bed, and he was taking a nap, and I had my tea, and I had a newspaper article in front of me, and I was so excited just to have a moment to read the paper, drink my tea, and I get a phone call. And the phone call is from a girlfriend of mine who had heard I just gave birth to a child without limbs. And she called me. She's like, I love you, and all these wonderful things your girlfriends say to you. And she says, he couldn't have been born to a more amazing family. And I said, thank you. That's a very nice thing to say. But I said, any mother would do anything for her child. And the reason I said that was when we were in the hospital and I gave birth to him, the doctors, the nurses immediately took him and were rushing, and they didn't know, he was born, completely different, but they didn't know if it was just a physical thing or maybe his heart, his lungs, like they didn't know when the baby was born. So they handed him to me for a second wrapped up, but then they immediately rushed him out of the room to start testing him. And I transformed to a ferocious mama bear, like animalistic love for this child. I know you know exactly what I'm feeling right now because I see you nodding your head. I became a ferocious animalistic mom, and I started ripping out the wires, and I was like, give me back my baby. All I wanted to do was grab my baby and run away from them. I didn't want them touching him. I didn't want anyone. He was my baby. And I felt this love like I never knew before. So now this woman, my girlfriend, 3 weeks later is telling me he was born. So, honey, I love you. You feeling me? You're remembering those emotions. Yeah, I know. Another mommy here that's gone through my journey. We're in this sisterhood together. So now my girlfriend, 3 weeks later, is telling me he couldn't have been born to a more amazing family. And I said, any mother would do anything for her child, right? I hang up the phone. I said, thank you. Hang up the phone. And right there on the front page of the LA Times newspaper, the article says, Chinese trash scavenger adopts 43 children. Huh? I start reading the article. Chinese trash scavenger, a man who survives by going through trash, adopts these children that he had found in the trash or on train tracks, left to die. Why? They were missing fingers. They were missing a part of their leg. They were born exactly the way my child was born. Literally, not even 15 seconds after I hung up the phone and said a mother would do anything for her child. And that was the transformative moment in our lives. I looked to my husband and I said, we've committed our lives to the environmental movement, but luckily, there are many people that could be the voice for the environment. There's not a voice for those children. And right then, we shifted our lives and we committed ourselves to serving the disabled community. Because it wasn't only, oh, you're so sweet. It was not only in China, but we had heard of parts in Africa where children are left to beg, all in the Middle East where children are left to die just because they were born different, just because they had a physical disability. And we knew that has to change.
There you go.
Wow. You know, it's always interesting. I've heard that story so many times, but it's definitely special to hear that again, hear the behind the scenes of all of that. So now, a question to both of you. What were the early days like? We got up to this moment where your perspective on what you wanted to do with your life and the impact you wanted to have pivoted. What were the early days like raising a kid with a disability when you really knew nothing? You were fresh, you knew nothing about the adaptive sports world, nothing about the disabled community. What was that like?
I'll take a swing at this one. So when I think about those early days, I mean, Bahar mentioned we really didn't know what we were doing, right? First of all, they don't really give you a book about how to raise a child, let alone a disabled child. And so I think we feel very blessed. We got such great advice along the way, right? So our strategy of raising Ezra was really just compiling suggestions and ideas. I mean, doing research, but like, okay, so how do you raise a kid with confidence, right? What's the strategy there? And there's really probably a couple pieces to this. The medical journey we had figured out right away. It wasn't easy, right? There were some tough things we had to navigate, but we got the ideas that we needed to implement from a medical standpoint actually at the hospital before we even left with a 2-day-old baby. So we kind of knew the basic strategy of removing the leg and transplanting a toe, some details there we didn't have figured out. But the real question was like, okay, but like the rest of his life, right? What does he have access to? How do we create opportunities for him? How do we make sure he is raised with a sense of confidence that he can achieve whatever he wants in life, right? And you know, you heard his speech yesterday where he touches on some of that, and Bahar gets a lot of credit, and she's going to jump in here in a second and explain some of that. But you know, one of the pieces of this was education, right? And building like a community around him where he didn't have to explain himself every day on the schoolyard, right? And so we kind of picked a school that allowed him to go from K through 12 that basically approximated a small town, right? And that was from just listening to amputees, young adult amputees, and the ones from small towns seemed to have better self-confidence than the ones from the big city, where literally every time you step out into the street, there's new people pointing at you and staring, right? Little things like that. We had a script, right, that Bahar worked with a child psychologist on that was amazing. We had our words that we used to describe this child, and then he became his own advocate because he heard the same words over and over and over and over again. But the piece of this that was a struggle for me was sports. So as a new dad, I thought, well, being a dad means getting outside with your kid and playing sport and teaching them every sport. So when they're on that playground, they can kind of handle themselves, right? They can play whatever sport's being played and sort of survive the playground. And so for me, I had a real sad summer there when he was first born because I sort of didn't understand this world of adaptive and Paralympic sports. I didn't know sports were really possible for people with disabilities. I like to say I was blind, right? Literally blind to this. And so my journey was a few months of being sad about this and thinking I had lost something, right? And I started to do some research in Google, looking around, like, are people doing sports as amputee? Are there amputee surfers? Literally never heard of such a thing, but that surfing was my sport. I really wanted to surf with my kids. Always dreamed of surfing with my kids. And I'm a Southern California, boy. And started to realize there were amputee surfers out there. And so that was sort of, and then we went to an event, he was about 5 months old, and we met some Paralympians. I met a really famous amputee surfer from Brazil. His name was the Pirate, because he built his first leg out of wood. The coolest thing ever, great guy. And so really meeting Pirata was sort of that switch for me. Like, things are possible. And I sort of made it my personal mission to become an expert in this space, right? I wanted to know what was possible for a kid with a disability and what was out there for him. And so I worked to sort of become as much of an expert as I could to really initially just guide his journey in sport, right? You want to jump in and throw anything else about the sort of the self-confidence side and the raising of an advocate?
I think, you touched on it. I think it's really important, as one day you will be parents yourselves, some of you youngsters here. But I think Ezra said in his speech, I would tell him, because Ezra said people stared at him like he was a zoo animal everywhere we went. And I just said, I want you to put your chest out, pound your chest, put your head up, and walk into every room like you own it. Look at everyone in the eye. I wanted my son to feel so confident everywhere he went, to own that room. But on top of it, we had a script. When he couldn't speak, we spoke for him. And I think the biggest turning point was, and I'll tell this quick story, and I think we should then move on to Angel. How are we doing on time? We're okay? Oh, okay. So I'll tell you a quick story. So when he was born, anywhere I could go to learn information, I would be driving down the street and I saw some guy walking without an arm. I literally made a U-turn, chased him into a store, ran up to him, and I said, hey, I just gave birth to a kid, and he doesn't have fingers, and I said, you look like you're really confident. What did your parents do right? Teach me, tell me what your parents did right. And literally, the guy said to me, he's like, which Clay just told you, he said, I was born in a small town, and I grew up with the same kids. So I grew up with them since I was little. They didn't care that I didn't have an arm, right? Then we met another guy. This guy was a stud. He was a pro soccer player. He was an amazing businessman. And we went to lunch with him. And he doesn't from his elbow down, nothing. He didn't have anything. Married, 4 kids, happy, confident. His name was Gabriel. And we're having dinner. And I said to him, Gabriel, how do you deal with all these people staring at you all the time? How do you deal with it? Because when Ezra was born, I was shooting Mission Impossible in Italy. And we had gone to a restaurant, and Italians are very loving. I walk into a restaurant. He was not even 1 month old. And I come in, and the restaurant owner goes, Bambino! And he comes and takes Ezra out of his crib, lifts him up, and literally the entire restaurant got silent. And he looked at Ezra because Ezra's leg was twisted. He was missing fingers. And he was in shock. He wasn't expecting to see a baby like that. And everyone in the restaurant just turned around and looked. And I was a new mom. And I just grabbed him and put him back in the crib. And I ran back to my hotel room and just started crying and crying and crying. And so for me, if anyone ever looked at my child, which they did, we'd go to the park, whatever, and anyone would stare, I would look back and stare at them like, don't you dare look at my baby like that. You know, like the fierce mama bear that I told you about before, that came out of me like a ferocious animal. You don't mess with my child. So now I'm sitting here with this guy, Gabriel, and I said, Gabriel, how do you deal with people staring at you all the time? How do you deal with it? What do you do? And he looks at me and goes, Bahar, if people don't stare at me, I think they're kind of weird. And I said, what? And he goes, of course people are going to stare at me. I don't have an arm. When I sit here and I'm cutting a steak with one hand and they don't stare at me, I think, dude, look at me. I'm cutting a steak with one hand. He goes, that's what people do. We constantly look and check each other out. And it was life-changing for me because it's true. We go, we look at people, we go to restaurants, we like looking at this, I like her dress, or she has beautiful hair. That's what we do. We're constantly looking and checking people out. So just shifting my perspective and not being angry, but actually realizing people are curious, life-changing. I went from being this angry, ferocious mother to actually being the mom that's like, wherever we went, which we went everywhere, we never hid Ezra. I never covered up his arm. He wore shorts and a short shirt everywhere he went. You could see his hand, you could see his leg. And everywhere we went, as he told you, people would stare, people would whisper, and instead of being angry, we turned around and said, hey, looks like you're curious about Ezra. Do you want to come over and meet him? Life-changing. I wasn't angry. I explained how he was born different, but then I would say to the kids, you know what? Yeah, look at all the differences that Ezra has. But I said to the little kid, I'd be like, but what are things that you have the same? Do you have one nose? And the kid would go, yeah. And I go, do you have two ears? And the kid would go, yeah. Do you have a heart that has feelings? And the kid would go, yeah. And I go, look at all the similarities you have with Ezra. And it was like, okay. And the kid would run off, and it was over. And just like that, with that way of looking and treating people and not being angry, we raised a boy to actually want to teach rather than be angry and be in a place of like frustration and why are people looking at me? It was more like, hey, you curious? Come on over. Let's all connect and meet one another. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, Ezra, the translation for Ezra, and this is why we named him Ezra, it means the teacher, the helper. Because when he was born, we said, you child, you're going to teach, and you're going to teach this world and help them understand that this world of ours is rich and diverse and beautiful with all its differences, colors, variations. That's what makes this world so special. And you be that man to teach the world that.
Every time she speaks, it's like this beautifully articulated speech. I was gonna say it's very fascinating to hear that stuff, and quite frankly, I didn't even know the story about in Paris at the restaurant, or not Paris, Italy in the restaurant. I've never heard that story before, so I'm in the same boat as you all. But next, I think we can begin to transition a little bit more and talk about Angel City Sports. How was this nonprofit formed? What was the journey, the idea? How did it all conceptualize? I think you could take this one, Dad.
Yeah, I can take this. So in Ezra's speech yesterday, he mentioned how much he loved sport growing up, right? I got an athlete in my first kid, right? I didn't know he could be an athlete. I didn't know that. And in his case, as an above-knee amputee, he had a running blade. He could kind of just integrate into sport, right? He could play basically any sport he wanted. And I got some great advice from a Paralympian who said when he's about 8 years old, take him to a Paralympic competition and just let him try a bunch of sports and see what he likes. And so I did that. And we don't have that many of these events in the United States, really a handful that offer 5 or more sports. And we went to one a couple thousand miles away, so pretty far away on the other side of the country. And this is 2013. Ezra's 8 years old, called the Endeavor Games. Great event. We had an amazing weekend. I had to take a couple days off of work, fly across the country. He tried a bunch of different sports, and he mentioned it yesterday, but he fell in love with track, right? He set some national records as a kid, youth records, and over the course of this weekend, I sort of started thinking more about what the experience we were having, and by Sunday, I asked this question, like, why don't we do these sports in Southern California? Like, why isn't this event happening in Southern California? And a couple of the track officials that overheard me, they're like, well, we're from California, and I don't know why we have to come to Oklahoma to be a track official. And so I got sort of inspired. I call it my lightning bolt moment, right? Sitting on the track in Oklahoma, tornado season, the middle of Tornado Alley, running track, right? We were from California, we're not from Oklahoma. And I sort of became obsessed with this idea of creating this same event in Southern California. And 2 years later, we launched the Angel City Games. It was really the first thing that we did as a nonprofit organization. And then since then have just been building, adding programming throughout the year, adding sports, growing the community, growing the number of athletes that we serve. And it's been a pretty amazing journey. And it's been fun too because Ezra's kind of gotten to grow up with it. And I love to hear your thoughts on just being so young and coming up almost parallel to this nonprofit, right, as we build our impact.
Yeah, I think it's really cool for me, right? Because as I've gotten older, I have this behind the scenes role of the games, but then I'm also the target audience, right? The event is made for people like me. I get to compete in the event. And so I get to see the on the ground impact. I get to see the power of this event and of events similar to Angel City Sports and the Angel City Games. And for me growing up, I fell in love with track, and then over the years, every year when we would have the games, I can look back on the videos, I can talk to people, and I can clearly map out the trajectory of how I went from an amateur track athlete who does this for fun to then making the U.S. national team. And the culmination of my track and field career up to a couple years ago was in the end of that video. When you guys saw that jump that I cleared and I was celebrating, that was the moment that I made the United States national team. And that jump that I cleared was at the Angel City Games. I had been high jumping, I had been competing at our nonprofits event every single year. I started out as a little kid who did it for fun and raced against the other kids and jumped against the other kids. And then the next year I was, a little bit better, a little bit stronger. I was competing against some of the older guys. And the next year I was competing against some of the adults. And then the next year was that jump. And I made the U.S. national team. And now I was the #2 high jumper in the U.S. And so it's cool for me to look back on these videos, look back on these experiences, and literally point out and map out the trajectory of how I improved. I went from just a little kid who had a dream to then someone actually living it. And so it's very special for me to see videos like that, look back on the moments, the early days when the nonprofit event was smaller, right? It wasn't that many people there, wasn't as many amputees, it wasn't as many people with disabilities. And then each year as I improved, the games got bigger. And the next year that I improved, the games got bigger and bigger until ultimately when I made the national team, and then now everything we're doing up to this point. But yeah, definitely, it's very special to look back on stuff like that.
So, oh, go
I
ahead.
was just going to add one more thing. And one of the things that's special about the adaptive sports movement and the Paralympic movement in the United States, at least right now, is it's still kind of small. And so it's easy to get to know everyone. I know if you come to one of our events, you literally will meet 20 to 30 Paralympians from the United States team, and even some international Paralympians come occasionally. So it's a pretty inspiring place to be. And it's an incredible community of athletes. Like, it's really fun. And the Paralympians love coming to support new athletes, right? They love meeting new athletes that haven't tried these sports and training and coaching them. And Ezra has a real passion for teaching amputees to run and getting them on the running blade for the first time.
One of my favorite things.
I mean, it's like, I swear, I feel like it's watching a miracle. Every time I see it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's so cool to see someone run if they've lost a leg a couple years ago or longer, and they haven't had that feeling of running since they lose their leg.
I mean, these are the things we take for granted.
Absolutely, that's what I was going to
The
say.
things we take for granted. I mean, I know you guys probably run from class to class. If you're late, you don't even think about it. But for someone who has that ability taken away from them, they didn't think it was possible. They didn't know if they would ever be able to run again. For them to experience that freedom is truly magical, and it's now become one of my favorite things to do is teach a new amputee, teach someone who didn't realize what was possible, didn't think they would ever be able to run again, get them on a running blade and get them running for the first time since the accident or amputation. Very, very special, very, very special.
So I think the final thing I would say is, where are we going and what can we learn from all this? And then I just want to add, listen, we have people that come to Angel City Sports from not only, I mean, we're talking to you guys about the United States, but we have people that come from all over the world just to come to our games. What we didn't tell you is not only do we do the clinics for all these sports, swimming, tennis, basketball, surfing, swimming, you name it, we do it, and archery, whatever, we're doing all this stuff. But on top of it, we do something that's really fun, which is a celebrity wheelchair basketball game, where these big celebrities, Adam Sandler, some of you know, like Christian Bale comes and supports. We get all these celebrities that come, and they go in a wheelchair, and they play with the professionals, and people come from everywhere to come and see these celebrities play wheelchair basketball. So we've become really famous because it's Los Angeles and it's Hollywood and all the cool celebrities and all the people that come out to support our community. And therefore, it's far-reaching. We're having people from Africa and China and Brazil, and hopefully one day you guys in Thailand come out to the Angel City Games. So Clay, tell us where we're going. What's the future hold for us?
Yeah, so there's still a lot of work to be done out there. We have not solved the access to sport, but we're making a lot of great progress, especially in Southern California. So over the next, call it 10 years, our plan is to sort of start taking some of our best practices and taking the model that we've built and have refined through lots of trial and error and failure in Southern Cal and moving it around the United States. And so one thing that we're really good at is combining community outreach with strong media coverage with the right kind of programming for the new athlete, right? So you can do all the work to bring a new athlete in or get the awareness in the media so they show up, but if you have the wrong programming for them, you might lose them. That might be the one time they try to go to an adaptive sports event, and if they don't have a good time or doesn't have a sport that they like or they don't meet someone that gives them that support that they're looking for, maybe they go away. They never come back. So it's so hard already to find that person. So we're really good at mixing, the outreach and the media with the right kind of programming. And so you'll see us starting to expand and work in other parts of the United States. And hey, who knows, right? Maybe ultimately, we expand internationally. Maybe we come to Thailand. So
That would be awesome. That would be awesome.
We're falling in love with Thailand. So you may see us internationally, but certainly here to be a supporter and advisor of anyone around the world that's looking to create anything like what we've created. We are head over heels in love with this community. We believe in the power of sport, right? We have a lot of work to do to get the awareness out there. I think globally, I don't know the global situation perfectly, but my guess is it's similarly misunderstood or not understood at all, right, around the world. So I think we got a lot to do, but you guys are all ambassadors now. You know a little bit about our journey, and hopefully are inspired to, certainly in your communities, talk to anyone with a physical disability and make sure they're aware of adaptive sport, make sure they're aware of the Paralympic Games, right, and to look for resources and maybe work with them to create programs if they don't exist in your areas. Ez,
All
you have
right.
anything?
Anything else, Ezra, you want to add?
Yeah, I can. My final thing will be speaking to the youth, speaking to you all, you students around my age. My one piece of advice would be, I know we all have these dreams, we all have these goals, we have these things that seem so unrealistic, seem so audacious that many times we are scared to go after them. And I think it's one of the biggest failures in life is setting goals that are too low and accomplishing them, rather than setting goals that are ridiculously high, giving everything we have to accomplish them, and then getting as close as we can. Whether we reach the goal or not is not the point, right? But if we set a goal for ourselves that is too low, if you have expectations of yourself that are too low and you achieve those expectations, you're now limiting your potential to whatever you believe you can do. And so this story of Angel City Sports, the story of how I made the U.S. team, is a perfect example of someone with a crazy dream, right? You know how difficult this nonprofit was to start for us, for this family, how much time and effort, how many times we thought we were going crazy because it was so difficult to do. It was a crazy dream. It started with my dad at the track saying, why don't we do this in LA? And there were tons of people along the way that have tried and failed and failed and failed again. For myself, when I was 11, I said, I'm going to make the Tokyo 2020 Paralympic team. Every single person thought that this was just a childhood dream. You know how many dreams little kids have? They want to be a police officer. They want to go to the NBA. They want to do this. How many of them actually follow through, continue training, give everything I have to make that happen? And so that was my childhood dream. That was my crazy, unrealistic goal that I set for myself. And sure enough, 5 years later, with 1 year postponement because of COVID, I made that dream happen. And now we've made this dream happen. And so to all of you guys, you're laying in bed at night, you're thinking about that one thing, that dream, that goal that seems unrealistic, seems a little crazy, you don't know how you're going to pull it off. Go after it. Truly go after it. Because your potential is all up here. Everything that you believe, everything that you expect of yourself is what will happen. You limit your expectations. You limit what you believe. You're forfeiting potential. So go after your dreams, those crazy ideas, those unrealistic things. And I hope you all have enjoyed listening to our nonprofit, the story of how it was created, which was really our crazy dream from the beginning. So
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank you all.
Thank you for joining us.